Charisse with the massive pot of French press coffee. Actually, it's not that massive because you didn't fill it up all the way.
It's because you said you didn't want it.
But you know someone else is going to drink it.
Not necessarily. Who else is coming in?
Someone's going to drink coffee if it's there. So this is a thing that came up. Scott was saying that, hey, are there things that we can change to making it up? Immediately draw in new listeners. Because the intro makes sense if you know us. But if you're the first time listening, you're like, yo, what are these people rambling on about? I only bring this up as like, do you think there is some sort of value add through some sort of like...
Yeah, I do.
Like you understand his concern.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But what does that look like? What does the new structure look like? Charisse and I are brainstorming live.
Why don't we just do like a 1 minute, like a 30 second... Is 30 seconds too long? Like a 20-second explanation at the start of... It's the same as the outro.
Sure, let's do it. On the fly. Charisse just gave me this weird look.
We used to do it, but I forget what we used to say. I'm pretty sure we said something along the lines of Making It Up is a weekly podcast focused on culture news where Eugene comes to the table with one topic and I come to the table with one topic and we pick each other's brains about it. I'm Charisse.
I'm Eugene.
It's a reverse of the ending.
I think that it actually makes sense.
No, I think it makes sense to include some kind of intro.
Scott, if you guys aren't familiar with, he was a guest on a podcast, I want to say 4 shows ago. I don't know. I think it's valid. Honestly, if you're a first-time listener, then you're probably thinking, what are these guys talking about?
If you're a first-time listener, wouldn't you also need an explanation of MAEKAN?
Yeah, we're so bad at marketing ourselves.
We are terrible.
Someone help.
We're
Somebody
really
help.
Bad. This is our open plea.
We're good at marketing other people, but not ourselves.
We are.
Whatever. I honestly, I don't feel that uncomfortable about it. Anyways, next week we'll have something a little bit more formulated.
Literally nothing is written down in this week's document.
Yeah, I know. I'm going off it on the fly.
48. This is the 48th episode.
Hey, you know what? When you get that good, it's all here. I'm going to see if you can hear me tapping my head.
If you want to apply some pressure, though, from this week's briefing, around 30 people did click on last week's episode. So there's interest. And someone was listening to us on the way to Calabasas.
Yeah, my friend David. He's going to go visit Yeezy.
Is that confidential information that we shouldn't be disclosing?
I mean, David is a pretty generic name. And Calabasas in this current cultural climate could only mean one thing. So I think it's a moot point of this. Anyways.
Do you keep up to date with the Kardashians at all?
Are you referring to the Jack, editing tweets thing?
Oh, no. Though I did see that. Did you see Kim stepping out in different Yeezy outfits?
No. Oh, is it one of those sort of formulated, hey, this is like a press shoot?
Well, no. It's like she's just leaving the house, but it's clearly arranged so that people can see this is what's coming out in the Yeezy collection upcoming.
Got it.
Actually looks pretty good. Oh, on that subject, I wanted to mention your outfit.
Oh.
What are you wearing? What are you wearing, Eugene?
I'm wearing some Nike shorts.
Can you describe your Nike shorts?
My Nike shorts are from the Alex collection. Matthew Williams of Alex.
And what's
and there's a towel that's draped across the front, kind of like a kilt, but not really.
It does kind of look like a kilt.
Yeah.
It's a
Thanks to
kilt.
the big homie Ivete from Nike China who sent me this as a birthday gift alongside the React 87s.
How are those?
God.
Are those comfortable?
They don't hug the foot as well as...
But you weren't... When you left the office yesterday, you hadn't even tied the laces.
Hey, that's style, okay? Anyways,
you can't not tie the laces and then complain about the foot.
The upper isn't stretchy, like a knitted upper. But it's interesting, Kay. This is actually an interesting segue because, as you know, last week we were talking shit. I don't want to call it talking shit.
We weren't talking shit.
We weren't
talking shit. We were holding accountable, as you said.
Sure, that's the thing. It's interesting because that came out. I tweeted about it. I'm trying to kind of put sense to it, right? Honestly, these are brands that I care about on the basis that they influence my lifestyle, not necessarily from a fashion perspective, but sports, all that stuff, all stuff I care about, right? So it was interesting because tweet this thing about trying to hold brands accountable, but then is that inconsistent if the next thing you see from me is check out the new Nike React 87s. Because I think that without people properly seeing the context and understanding it, which I think gets lost on social media, it's like, yo, this guy's like, he doesn't really have as strong a point of view as he says he does. But I want to also make it clear that there's a differentiation between support and accountability. Like you can still support something, but you want to hold them accountable.
Yeah, and I also don't think, we weren't talking about something that's like a big deal breaker, like a
misstep
like
that
a
we wanted to.
factory situation and 120 people died in like a garment factory fire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're discussing the fine points of a campaign.
But for me personally, as you know, like I try to maintain this super high level of consistency.
Mm-hmm. I know.
That I was thinking to myself, like I was going to post something on Twitter. I'm like it kind of feels weird because unless people probably understand, I almost feel as though you want someone to call you out on it. It's a vector for you to discuss.
If you want to be totally consistent, even when we're talking about, the React sneakers and the Alex shorts that you're wearing, it's still with thoughtfulness. I mean, you're not the type of person.
You're trying to make me feel better because it's working.
You're not the type of person who's just you don't just wear a garment for the hype, right? That's my understanding of you.
Yeah,
and
generally speaking.
So long as you treat what you're wearing with the same attitude, I think you're in the clear.
Yeah.
I mostly just wanted you to describe your shorts because I think it's funny.
I mean, they're pretty technical. If you didn't know they were a quote-unquote collab, they minus the towel, they'd feel like ACG shorts.
Yeah. They fit in with your wardrobe.
Thank you, because they're black.
And no, with the technical aspect as well, I think.
So the whole topic of what you just mentioned in regards to thoughtfulness, we recently interviewed and are working on a story with Brendan from Noah, who used to work at a very high-profile streetwear brand. I'll let you guys fill in the gaps and Google that if you don't know. It's interesting to hear his thought because there's such a definitive disconnection between his persona, what he believes in, and the world he came from. And there's a very high level of thoughtfulness and consideration to what he does. One of the most interesting questions I found that came courtesy of David K. Chang, who's working on it, is he just asked, like, what's the inconsistency between you having sort of an underlying societal cultural message around like whether it's consumption and being a fashion brand, right? So I think that's really interesting. Like I always feel as though you want to ask these difficult questions that on the surface level seem inconsistent because I think that the underlying reason why they've done that is so interesting.
Yeah, I'm really
making sense of inconsistencies. I think is really interesting.
I'm really looking forward to it coming out, especially because you were talking about it yesterday, and you seemed you seemed genuinely excited. And
yeah, it's a long ass interview.
Don't
it's
get
like
excited by much.
It's like an hour and 40-minute interview. It's not going to be that long, but it's both text and audio.
Oh, great! That's awesome.
But you know what? I have come to the realization, like, I've been super excited about the MAEKAN stories we've done.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that
over the course of the last few weeks. It's just like things that I listen to and I'm like, I can genuinely feel proud of.
Yeah. Actually, I had 2 stories that I worked on getting out the door this week that I'm really happy with. The one that came out on Tuesday about Shauna X and her current show at Edu in New York called F Your Manners. And then the one that just went up yesterday, written by Myra Jamshed, about the underground music scene in Karachi, Pakistan. I think I'm happy with them for some disparate reasons and then some of the same reasons. And the similarity is getting to feature women that I'm really excited to work with, Shauna and Myra. Myra's not the focus of the story, but working with her to produce it. And then the other thing is I think just being able to show parts of the world that I believe MAEKAN readers are interested in, but we haven't talked about as much. Shauna does installation and design in a way that I don't think we've really covered. We have done fine art and painting. And then Karachi, we haven't done any stories there. So it's really great for me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this week, you and Alex are featured in, I actually haven't listened to the podcast yet, but I did watch the video in episode 3 of this Mixcloud and Share series called Making It. And you guys are talking about the beginning of MAEKAN and the ideas that went into it. How you feel about the rollout?
It's good. I mean, we don't do a ton of video content, so it's nice to have that element to it. When stuff like that comes out about me, I'm not super excited to go and consume it, look at it, right?
Is it because it's you though?
It's me though.
Yeah.
I don't get that excited. And I kind of understand when certain celebrities or whatever, like, well, that's kind of weird to say it like that. But you know, when people that are in the press, like, they get desensitized, they don't read about themselves, they don't care. The reason why you're doing things is not really because of that.
But I think it's good for MAEKAN in general to have you and Alex out there in a visible way.
Because we're bad marketers.
Well, no, that's not what I was going to say. Because it's good to remind, we put out a lot of great content, lots of good stories that people are reading, but it's also good to remind people of like the root
of
the company. You know, it's not just like not just understanding us by a story basis, like each story that comes out, but getting behind us as a company.
Yeah, and I always wanted MAEKAN to be super transparent. There's no point focusing on the end product if you think it was that easy or like you're that lucky. Like, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are happening, and everyone's mileage varies, but there's a lot of time spent in building this and a lot of missteps. You know, things that could have happened faster, things that should have been canned earlier.
It's so funny because the Mixcloud Sure video, and I haven't listened to podcasts, but I believe in this, is celebratory, and you're just out the gate being like, oh, we did all these things we could have done better.
Well, I mean, that's always going to be my perspective on it.
But it's been good reception.
Yeah.
People have been really psyched to see your faces.
Should we get going?
Into your mystery subject?
No, you go first. You know my subject.
Yeah, let's do it. I wound up sticking with it after changing my mind yesterday to talk about Roger Federer. Reportedly, by the way, it's a rumor.
It's a rumor?
I looked further into it, and the first time I came across this news, I thought it was a 90% confirmed thing, but with further, internet research, it seems not as solid as I'd originally thought. So the rumor is that Federer is moving from Nike to Uniqlo. So what is true is that, so Roger Federer, do I need to explain this?
Just me in passing. If you don't follow tennis, you might not know.
36-year-old tennis legend. I don't have his record in front of me, but, just all-time great. Currently ranked world second after Nadal. And previously, I think for a long time, world first. So he has been exclusively sponsored by Nike since 1994. And that deal expired earlier this year, I think in March. So he's in the talks with someone, because I don't for a second believe he's not going to sign with a brand, right?
Of course.
So the rumor is that Uniqlo is going to sign him for $300 million over 10 years. And this is interesting for several reasons. One is that, what exactly is Uniqlo thinking behind this? Because Federer is not going to be in the game for another 10 years. Like, that's just the truth of it, based off of his age and how the world of tennis is evolving. And then also Uniqlo doesn't do footwear. So Federer would still have to find another shoe sponsor. And Uniqlo is also not known for technical athletic apparel, despite previously having signed
I think
Djokovic.
They kind of are.
Explain that.
What do you think Heat Tech is? That's technical apparel. I think there's definitely a thread that's woven through Uniqlo. And also look at like their underwear, their socks, like it has Cool Max. Like, I think there's an underlying performance element that isn't the most marketed element, but it exists.
But do you think of it on a Federer level?
Part of me feels as though when it comes to those performance products, really, what do you need to offer? You just need to offer something that breathes well and sheds sweat.
So you're saying that,
and even to that point,
the actual clothing that someone of Federer's level does not really matter. Does not really
I don't think it matters
that
much. I think footwear is way more important.
Which is so interesting though, because Uniqlo's not doing footwear.
To that point, like good example, like Adidas Boost, right? Boost wasn't developed by Adidas. It was by a factory, and then they've taken it. So likewise, why doesn't Uniqlo go and license a really amazing fabric, and that just becomes the element behind the piece?
What do you think of when you think of Uniqlo potentially signing Federer in that dynamic? does your mind go to, oh, this is a good thing for Uniqlo, or this is a good thing for Federer? Like, do you understand my question?
Federer's getting paid. Uniqlo is creating a little bit more sports relevance.
Actually, I also wanted to, I was thinking about, what can we talk about on a bigger level? I do still think this individual news item is interesting, but we do try to talk about news items that are related to bigger things happening, right? And I thought it'd be a good opportunity to just talk about sponsorship in general. And I was trying to think of whether these types of sponsorships exist outside of sports.
They've started to, but not to the same degree. Sponsorship can exist in different planes. It's like, oh, it's an event sponsorship, kind of ephemeral. You throw your name on a big sort of poster or a backdrop, a lanyard, etc. So you kind of see a little bit more where consumer products are going down a route, but I think that sponsorship can also just be positioned differently. If Le Creuset, a French homeware company, collaborates with a chef, that's technically sponsorship in a different way. It's licensing, right?
I thought about that, but I was also wondering if I was thinking about what other industry does it make sense for an exclusive sponsorship to exist? Because I was thinking about, bear with me, makeup artists. Okay. And let's say, do you know MAC?
Yes.
The makeup brand.
Yes.
Okay. Let's say MAC wants to sign this famous makeup artist. I just don't see that makeup artist being willing to make that move exclusively because it's like part of their artistry, part of that person's craft to try everything, right? And
you would know better than me in this capacity because there's certain...
I was trying to think of, believe me, I try to think of another metaphor for you.
But like, let's say you went to MAC and part of sponsorship is also co-developing product together. So what if you go to a MAC and not only can you put your name behind something, you're helping influence the tools that make your life better. So I think that in general, like...
Or what about for us, like we were talking about Shure and Mixcloud. What if we exclusively used Shure equipment? Does that make sense just from an operational perspective? I guess what I was getting at is that for a makeup artist, it would be a limitation on what you are capable of doing.
This is, whether it's a popular, unpopular opinion, when it comes to the realm of performance products, I would argue that at this point in time, in many well-developed industries, the difference at the top is marginal. So like you might be quote unquote forced to use Mac products. Company of Mac's size, it might not be the best, but I don't think it's that much worse than a product that's 3 times the price. And I don't know makeup, but I also think that when it comes to footwear, let's say you're a Nike athlete, is an Adidas basketball shoe that bad?
No, see, that's why I felt
it's
that
marginal.
For athletes, it works because I believe that LeBron, who is with Nike, he gets the best.
He gets the best, but I also think he could perform in other stuff.
Yeah, like that. If he did choose to sign with Adidas or Under Armour, he would still be getting the best.
Steph
I don't
Curry.
think it would be
like
not
theoretically. You
difference.
could say that since Under Armour doesn't have the same pedigree R&D budget as Nike, I mean Steph Curry is still a high performing athlete. So the younger me, very heavily influenced by having the best. Older me realized that sport and equipment is but a small component.
Is there anything you can think of, though, where a professional would not want to be limited by a single company's products?
It would have to be very nuanced. Basically, if you become exclusive to this product range, it would need to be that that company wouldn't allow you to utilize other products from other ranges that aren't necessarily in competition. For whatever reason, like, oh, I'm developing new product lines, or like, hey, I just don't like those guys. I think it's tough to enforce, to be honest.
The only thing I could think of was if you are in a role where being impartial is part of the job. Let's say Nicole, right? It would be weird to have a deal where she could only eat at a certain chain of restaurants.
Yeah, that's actually a good example.
Or a certain group of restaurants because it's part of her job description to be impartial. sorry, the background is Nicole runs That Food Cray.
It's like a food blog. I think that makes sense to a degree. But I think that it couldn't be to the point where it limits all food. Do you know what I mean? Even if you have certain deals, like they don't own you. The sponsor doesn't own you. Like they can't be like, hey, you have to eat 3 meals a day at this restaurant. But it's like, hey, you need to eat and be present for at least 5 meals a month.
Right. And even for big athletes, it doesn't mean, wait, actually does it? Can they wear other brands
You've seen it before.
their off?
You've seen it before, whether they get in trouble. I'm sure they do. It's not preferable, but you don't own them.
Yeah, but it's just like, okay, if you go to Wimbledon, you got to wear the Nike outfit.
Yeah.
I had another question for you. Can you actually think of in your life where a big sponsorship deal made a difference to the way you perceived a brand?
Good question. I'm probably a little jaded for that, to be honest.
Can you even remember something from, let's say, your childhood or teenage years where there was this really iconic linking of a person and a brand?
I think it has to be David Beckham and Adidas for me. That's probably the only one. I think the reason is because I was just so much more impressionable at the time. Like you're 13, 14 years old, right? I was a goalkeeper and I still found that something about David Beckham just pulled me into that world. I don't know if it was a lifestyle element.
I think a lot of people who don't even care about football can say that about David Beckham.
But I think it's disproportionate around females. Like David Beckham's a good footballer, but
he's a very good looking man.
That's fine. But
sorry,
I'm just
anyway,
saying,
Adidas.
But I'm just saying that I think that made a big difference for me.
Him being good looking?
Him being at the crossroads of being decent at football and decent at lifestyle promotion.
You can remember distinctly connecting him to the brand Adidas.
Yeah.
In a way that affected the way you perceived Adidas?
Well, actually, that's a good point because I was always, for the most part, pro Adidas. Actually did make a difference is Nike and the Brazilian national team. That actually makes a difference because I think that what Brazil did.
Wait, sorry, can you give me context because I don't know the history of this.
At the time, like Brazil obviously wasn't sponsored by Nike, and by virtue of Nike being, because I think Brazil left Umbro, right, and joined Nike. While it wasn't necessarily Nike as a whole that kind of like made me change the perception of the brand. What it did do was allow Nike's brand of marketing to do its thing with Brazil. And I think the ensuing content that came from that is actually what really made a big difference. Does that make sense?
That is interesting.
It's not that it's a very different sort of by proxy way of influence.
Is this 1996?
See if you can Google the Nike airport commercial. Just can you search Nike Brazil commercial? You turn it.
Oh, so you can watch it.
Yeah. Oh, like, you can't really see it.
No, that's fine.
Like the song, everything. Dude, this ad is so good.
Yeah. I can see how this would be very memorable.
So I was probably 14, 15. Oh, also that guy's like a cameo, Eric Cantona.
And I love how they're just wearing these super simple tees.
Yeah.
That's just like the Nike swoosh and then Brazil underneath.
Yeah.
No, that's good. And actually, I can also see how, I do wonder if sponsorship, the nature of it has changed, or if really we should be focusing on smaller brands that are doing sponsorship on smaller levels.
Mm-hmm.
Because 96 Nike is very different, right, from 2018 Nike, which
It's
is
a little
why
bit smaller, yeah.
it would have been more impactful,
Yeah.
I think, a deal like this and an ad like this coming out.
What becomes interesting is that sponsorship in this day and age is so lucrative, but I'm also curious, what are the sort of inflationary things around sponsorship now that maybe didn't exist? So for example, back in the day, you couldn't be like, hey, the whole Brazilian national team has like 100 million followers combined, right? There's different things now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all brands have become more successful. But I think the cost of sponsorship influencers has gone up.
Definitely.
So that to me is like interesting as well to think about.
I honestly don't have anything I remember from my childhood or teenage years that had this kind of lasting impact.
But also, I think it's because your interest didn't really lend itself to something of sponsorship value.
True.
Right? Like the art world doesn't really have sponsorship per se. Like you don't really have artists that are sponsored by Faber-Castell. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
The notion is funny. I was actually thinking of musicians possibly, but I don't think those really existed back then.
Yeah. And even then, like, even if this musician is sponsored by Fender, in the grand scheme of things, like, you're not going to go out and buy a Fender if you're not into music and you're going to play. But whereas like Nike, you could buy that t-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Brazil t-shirt.
Even if you weren't interested in,
Yeah. I think the different vectors are really critical. It allows the consumption element to kind of rear itself or develop, and it depends. So ultimately, Federer going to Uniqlo, if I was to kind of bring this to a close, I find it pretty interesting and fascinating. I think it'll bring a lot of visibility to Uniqlo as a semi-credible performance player. Because I think in many ways, like, you see that the whole world of athleisure, whatever, being so incredibly important. And I think the GQ article references it as well. It talks about how he's perceived to be a stylish guy. I think to that point, I think that's where the value comes in. Even if he's not playing in 5 years, there's still residual.
Yeah, of course.
He's going to be playing in some testimonial match. He'll still be like out there.
And it's interesting for me. You know, I asked you earlier that question about, does this change your perception of either Uniqlo or Federer, or how does the dynamic between them change? Federer is powerful enough that signing Uniqlo elevates Uniqlo and lets people to consider it in a more serious way beyond being a casual.
To the tune of $300 million.
Well, if they have it.
I mean, over 10 years, that's not that much. It's like 30 million a year.
To Uniqlo, yeah, it's not that much. To you or me.
My topic this week is Grindr's online publication Into launches a production studio for LGBTQ plus creators. Grindr, if you guys aren't familiar, is a dating app for the LGBTQ plus community. And they previously had a publication called Into that celebrated its 1 year anniversary. And what they've done to celebrate that is they've created a production studio in West Hollywood for creatives of the LGBTQ plus community to engage in. By virtue of this, what it means is that if you're someone from that community, you can use their services free of cost. The way that it's going to play out is that if, let's say, Charisse goes and creates content in the studio, it will be licensed for usage on the Into online publication. And from there, they'll have the rights to sell advertisements against it and monetize it that way. One of the most interesting elements of why this exists is because for some people previously, they weren't provided the right tools or right platform to create the videos they needed to create based on their subject matter.
So and also just knowing that there's probably a smaller segment of a regular studio's budget and interest that would be interested in your subject.
In recent times, like a lot of people coming to the table that have kind of available quote unquote real estate, right? Space, and allowing people to best utilize that to accomplish goals. And I think it's really cool. Honestly, Into is not something I check every day, or I don't even know if I've been on the site. But what I do find interesting is that it's a further sort of indication that you're creating these very narrow channels. They're narrow in a certain sense, and maybe more defined is a better way of communicating it. So you go in there, you have a space to work out of, you're free of judgment, you can do what you want, create what you want, and you already have a home for it. Like, I think that is actually an incredibly impactful opportunity, because for a lot of creatives, not only is, well, I would say that depending on what your subject matter is, maybe having access to create what you need in the backdrops and the sort of the scenery isn't that difficult to get your hands on or to work out of. But distribution is another big thing, right? Let's say hypothetically Into becomes the premier, I don't know how it ranks within that whole space of publications and media companies, but if it becomes a very strong player, and mind you, I don't have the app So I couldn't tell you if the content is available on the app, but there's so many distribution channels.
It's possible.
Yeah, and I think that is something that, for better or worse, for the modern day creative, it's very challenging. It's one thing to create amazing content. It's another thing, as we mentioned over the course of this podcast, like distribution and marketing and all that stuff is actually very difficult. Like just because you're a great director or a great photographer doesn't mean you're a great marketer.
Yeah.
Even though success is predicated on marketing capabilities.
And I think especially for this type of content, LGBTQ plus, one of the concerns that sparked, I think, Into and Grindr making this decision is that social media platforms may sometimes flag this content as inappropriate or like not suitable for everyone, or just limited to a smaller audience, right? So there's more, what you were saying in general about, young creatives trying to get their content out there is still true. But I think especially for this sector of people, there's that additional obstacle.
Do you think there's any value in the content they're creating being ported to the rest of the world? Or is it going to always exist in its own channel if you're already building this channel into itself to be self-sufficient? Do you need more context to that?
I think what is likely to happen is Into starts giving resources to producing creative content of all kinds. And some of it will just be interesting to the Into audience or the Grindr audience. But then some of it is going to be appealing to everyone. And just because Into has facilitated creating more stuff, there naturally is going to be a greater portion of that gets out to the rest of the world.
One thing I've been thinking is that there's this notion that you should just create your own worlds, right? If the rest of the world is not allowing you to participate, create your own world.
Well, there's been a lot of segmentation.
Like basically it's in promotion of segmentation. I guess it's an almost evolution of the previous question, is that if the ultimate goal, let's just say we all agree that the ultimate goal is equality. What happens when we no longer feel the need to talk about equality in certain spaces because we found self-sufficiency on our own?
I think that's dangerous. I don't
like it either, but I just wonder if there has the unintended consequence.
I mean, I can understand why that exists too. Let's say you belong to part of a community that you feel in general society you're harassed or you are looked down upon in some way, or you're just not included, then having a space for yourself is comforting, is welcoming. You want to just stay there, right? And that's important too, that you have comfort and the safety to create what you want and to express yourself how you want. I would hope that that's not the ending place. You don't just stay there. You have to shore it up with your community. You want to have an influence on greater society, right? And we just have to have people continue to want to do that, or else we'll all just stay in very small bubbles. In
what circumstance are bubbles beneficial?
I was just going to say, to apply it to ourselves more directly, I was thinking about the Asian American experience because of that piece we published with Shauna, and her exhibition, her show was covered by other media outlets as well. And some of them are specifically, they say outright that we're for Asian Americans. Like, we want to promote those voices in particular. The purpose of these spaces is, like I said, so that more, whatever it is, more videos, writing, shows can happen by people who feel excluded from general society. But the next step after that is to make that appealing to everyone. Or not make that appealing to everyone, but to share it with everyone in the hopes that it will be appealing.
I don't feel comfortable when things are defined in such tangible terms. Like Asian American, that's a very tangible thing. You can picture that, right?
I think it's necessary, though.
But then on the flip side, MAEKAN wasn't doing this story.
Do you think, though, that maybe you feel uncomfortable about that because there's nothing about who you are that you feel excluded from?
Potentially, which actually is a pretty good revelation. I mean, I've never really felt like I needed to be part of anything per se, in terms of like, and if I wasn't, maybe for a split second, I'd be like, oh, I'll just do it on my own, or I'll just figure out something else. So, but I also feel like my point I was trying to get to was that looking at that sort of lens, and I'm curious how a Shauna X story on an Asian American platform would differ from MAEKAN. Like for me, the equalizer across the board for MAEKAN is creative culture that takes shape in all different forms, shapes, and sizes, right? Versus like, hey, you know what? If you're on an Asian American publication, that naturally pushes the conversation in a certain place. And I don't know, there's not really any sort of like sequential order of operations where get your local community of Asian Americans inspired, engaged, which will then give them confidence to go out and do stuff in a bigger picture. I don't know if that's like the kind of general thought process, or it's just to build on a very sort of close to home basis, like build community and make people feel confident.
I think it's more about the community aspect. I don't think a Shauna X story on another platform looks different. Like on an Asian American platform looks different than the way that we shared it. And I also don't think that like an into produced video should look different on its own site vs on It's Nice That. You know, I think it can be shared in the same way. I think the difference is like, let's say all the readers of Into talk to each other in the comment section, or they have their own Slack, or they're on the Twitter feed together, then they have comfort there. And that's like the gathering place. It's the point of connection.
I feel like we identify like 3 really interesting key points, and that was the discussion.
I think that's a good place to wind things up. Oh, I suddenly remembered halfway through this read, I wanted to try flipping it. You do the first part, and then I do the subscription part.
Okay.
You do, if you're interested in learning more about MAEKAN, visit MAEKAN.com.
Okay. If you're interested in learning more about MAEKAN, check out our website, MAEKAN.com, MAEKAN.com. Or if you just want a very quick snapshot, check us out on Instagram. Hopefully that'll lead you to the site.
You can also subscribe to us to wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like this podcast, you can do us a big favor by sharing this episode with a friend.
Yours was much better than mine. Like that, my part felt very natural, and your part felt also very natural.
That's good. I was wondering if it was more 48 episodes in. It finally occurred to me. Maybe we should flip this around.
Yeah. I'm Eugene.
I'm Charisse.
And this is Making It Up.